She gripped her suitcase so hard her knuckles went white, and she hadn't even gotten through the stable door yet. Every person in town had told her the same thing: Nathan Cole is dangerous. Don't trust him. Don't get close. She had memorized those warnings like a prayer. And then she walked in and found him, this man everyone feared, kneeling in the dirt beside a wounded horse, his voice so low and so gentle the animal had stopped trembling. He looked up at her. He took off his hat, and he said, "You must be Anna. The ride was long. You should rest." She didn't know what to do with kindness. She only knew how to survive cruelty. If that first moment already got you, stay with me. Subscribe to this channel and follow this story all the way to the end, because I promise you, it goes places you won't expect. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to Wyoming Territory, 1885. And find out what really happens when the person you've been taught to fear turns out to be the only one who ever made you feel safe. The warnings had started in Millhaven, the small transit town where Anna Whitmore spent her first night after the long train ride west. She had barely set her bag down in the boarding house before the woman at the front desk, a broad, efficient woman named Mrs. Paulson, who wore her opinions the way other people wore jewelry visibly, and at all times looked at Anna's travel papers and said, "Black Creek Ranch, Nathan Cole's place." "That's right," Anna said. Mrs. Paulson set the key on the counter with a particular deliberateness. "You know about him." "I know he needs someone to manage his household records," Anna said, "and that the position pays decently." "He's not." Mrs. Paulson started, and then stopped, and then started again. "He's not like most men out here. I'll say that." "In what way?" Anna asked, because she had learned that the information people hesitated over was usually the information worth having. "Keeps to himself," Mrs. Paulson said. "Never comes into town unless he has to. Doesn't socialize. Doesn't talk much. 3 men left his ranch in the past 2 years, just packed up and left, and none of them said exactly why, but they all had the same look about them when they passed through here afterward. Like something had put the fear in them." Anna's hands were steady as she took the key. She had spent 6 years working for a man in Providence who expressed his displeasure by throwing ledger books across the room and screaming at clerks in front of the entire office. She had survived that. She could survive a quiet cowboy in Wyoming. "I appreciate the information," she said. "I'm just telling you what I know," Mrs. Paulson said. "You seem like a sensible woman. Sensible women don't usually end up at Black Creek Ranch." Anna went to her room. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the wall for a long time. She was not, if she was honest with herself entirely, without fear. But fear had become such a familiar companion over the past 2 years that she had learned to carry it quietly, to function alongside it, to make decisions in spite of it, rather than because of it. She had left Providence because her employer had spent 3 years taking credit for her work, underpaying her by a margin that was insulting even by the standards of the time. And when she had finally submitted a formal accounting of the discrepancy in writing. Because Anna Whitmore always worked in writing, always had documentation, he had responded by terminating her position and suggesting, with the particular smugness of a man who has never faced consequences, that she would have difficulty finding other employment given her difficult temperament. She had packed her things that afternoon. She had written 6 letters that evening. And 3 weeks later, when the response from a land agent in Wyoming Territory described a position managing records and household accounts for a remote ranch operation at a salary that was twice what she'd been earning in Providence, she had written back the same day. She had not asked about the ranch owner's reputation. She wished, sitting in Mrs. Paulson's boarding house, that she had asked about the ranch owner's reputation. She heard more in the morning. At breakfast, 2 men at the next table were talking about Nathan Cole without particular discretion, either because they assumed she wasn't listening or because they didn't care. "Heard he turned down Hale's offer again," the first man said. "3rd time in 2 years. "Cole's a fool," the second man said. "Hale's offering good money for that water access. Cole doesn't want Hale's money. Cole doesn't want much of anything from anybody, is the impression I get." "Man's not right," the second man said with conviction. "Living out there alone all those years. No family, no neighbors to speak of. Just him and whatever hands he can keep long enough to be useful. There's something wrong with a man who lives like that. Maybe he just doesn't like people, the first man said. That's what I'm saying, the second man said. There's something wrong with a man who doesn't like people. Anna set down her coffee cup and looked at her eggs. A man who didn't like people, who kept to himself, who had driven away 3 employees, who lived alone by choice in the mountains of Wyoming and refused to do business with someone named Hale. She was going to be living on his ranch. She reminded herself firmly that she had documentation. She had the signed letter of employment. She had a clear description of her duties and her compensation. She had legal recourse if things went wrong. She reminded herself that she was a practical woman and that practical women did not turn back because of rumors. Then she picked up her coffee and drank it and told herself she wasn't afraid. She was afraid. The ride out to Black Creek Ranch took most of the morning. The driver of the supply wagon, a weathered man named Pete, who had been making the run between Millhaven and the outlying ranches for 15 years, was a different kind of informant than Mrs. Paulson. Less alarmed, more matter-of-fact, with the particular equanimity of someone who has dealt with a wide range of human behavior and has calibrated his concern accordingly. "You going out to work for Cole?" he said about 20 minutes into the ride. "I am," Anna said. "Record-keeping and household management." "Yes." Pete nodded slowly. "He needs somebody for that. He's been running the books himself, and the books aren't happy about it from what I understand." "What can you tell me about him?" Anna said. "Honestly, not the boarding house version." Pete thought about it. She appreciated that he thought about it rather than just talking. "He's a hard man," Pete said finally. "Not hard like cruel. Hard like he's been through things that would break most people, and he came out the other side still standing, but standing kind of alone. You know the type?" "Yes," Anna said quietly. "He works harder than anyone I've ever seen," Pete continued. "I've been bringing supplies out there for 6 years, and I don't think I've ever arrived and found him not already in the middle of something. He's always in the middle of something." He paused. "He's fair, I'll say that. He pays what he owes when he owes it without being asked twice, and he doesn't say things he doesn't mean. If Nathan Cole tells you something, you can take it as true. But," Anna said, because there was clearly a but. "But he doesn't let anyone in," Pete said. "Whatever's behind those eyes of his, he keeps it locked up tight, and he's not interested in unlocking it for anybody. The men who left," he shook his head. "I don't think he scared them off. I think they couldn't stand the silence. It gets to some people, that kind of quiet. The kind that feels like judgment even when it probably isn't." Anna thought about that for the rest of the ride. The kind of quiet that feels like judgment even when it probably isn't. She had known men who used silence as a weapon, who went cold and wordless when they wanted to punish someone who made their silence loud with meaning. She had learned to fear that particular silence, the loaded kind, the kind that pressed against you until you apologized for things you hadn't done. She didn't know yet which kind Nathan Cole's was. She was about to find out. The ranch came into view in the early afternoon. It was larger than she'd expected, not in the showy way of someone building to impress, but in the solid, functional way of someone who had added what was needed as it was needed, and had never wasted space on anything that didn't serve a purpose. The main house was well maintained. The outbuildings were in good repair. The fences she could see from the road were straight and solid. Whatever else Nathan Cole was, he was not negligent. Pete pulled the wagon to a stop in the yard and climbed down. "Hello, the house," he called. Nothing. "Probably in the stable," Pete said to Anna with the ease of a man who was used to this. "He's always in the stable." Anna climbed down from the wagon and straightened her coat and picked up her suitcase. She looked at the stable. She looked at the house. She made the decision she always made when something frightened her, which was to walk directly toward it rather than away. She walked to the stable door. She pushed it open and stopped. The man was kneeling in the straw beside a horse, a bay mare with a wrapped foreleg, who was standing with the particular careful stillness of an animal in pain that has decided to trust the person beside it. He was adjusting the wrapping with both hands, working with a slowness and precision that was almost tender, and he was talking to the horse in a low voice, just above a murmur, the words not quite distinguishable, but the tone unmistakable, patient, reassuring, steady. He was nothing like the man she had been building in her mind for 36 hours. She must have made a sound, a breath, a shift in her weight, something small, because he looked up. He was in his mid-30s, dark-haired, dark-eyed, with the kind of face that had been weathered by outdoor work into something that had left softness behind a long time ago. Not handsome exactly, or not, in any way, she had a ready category for more, the kind of face you trusted because it looked like it had earned what it wore. He looked at her for exactly 2 seconds. Then he stood in one unhurried motion and removed his hat. "You must be Anna," he said. "The ride was long. You should rest." She had prepared herself for wariness, for assessment, for the kind of slow look-over that men gave women when they were deciding how much of a problem she was going to be. She had not prepared herself for that, for the complete simple normalcy of it. Like her arrival was expected and welcome, and entirely not a complicated thing. "I'm fine," she said. The words came out slightly stiff, which was what happened when she was caught off balance. "I'd rather see where I'll be working first." He looked at her for a moment. Something moved in his expression, not quite amusement, not quite anything she could name. "All right," he said. "I'll show you the house." He put his hat back on and walked past her out of the stable, and she turned and followed him, and that was how it began. Not with drama, not with the confrontation she had been bracing for, but with a man who had told her she should rest, and then when she declined, simply adjusted. She didn't know what to do with that either. The house was clean. Not cleaned up before her arrival clean, but genuinely habitually clean, the kind of clean that comes from a person who simply does not tolerate disorder. Not from any performance of domestic respectability, but because disorder costs time, and time is something you don't waste on a working ranch. He showed her through it quickly and without ceremony. The main room, the kitchen, the room that served as the ranch office where the ledgers were stacked with a disorganization that was the only chaotic thing she had seen so far. The room that would be hers, small, but with a good window and a solid lock on the door, which she noted and which she suspected was not an accident. "The ledgers need attention," he said, standing in the doorway of the office. "I can see that," she said. "I'll leave them to you. You'll tell me when you have questions." "I will," she said. And then, because she had learned that establishing professional terms early prevented complications later, she said, "I want to be clear about how I work, Mr. Cole. I'm thorough and I'm accurate, but I need access to everything, every account, every transaction, every piece of correspondence that touches the finances. I can't do a half job, and I won't." He looked at her steadily. "I wouldn't have hired you for a half job." "Some employers say that and mean something different," she said. "I mean what I say," he said. She held his gaze for a moment. He didn't look away. "All right," she said. He nodded. "The cook comes 3 times a week. Meals are at 6 and noon when the work allows. The men eat separately." He paused. "If you need anything, ask Jesper. He's been here longest and he knows where everything is." "Jesper," she said. "My foreman," he said. "You'll meet him at supper." He turned to go and then turned back. "One more thing." She waited. "Whatever you heard in town about me," he said, "I'd ask you to wait and see what's true before you decide." He said it flat and direct without defensiveness or apology. "People talk. I don't much bother about it, but I'd rather not have you afraid of something that isn't there." She stared at him. "How did you know?" she started. "Because everyone who comes here from Millhaven has the same look," he said. "And you came in gripping your suitcase like it was the only solid thing in the world." He held her gaze for one more second. "Rest when you need to. The ledgers will still be wrong tomorrow." He left. She stood in the doorway of the office and looked at the disorganized ledgers and listened to his footsteps cross the main room and go out the front door. He had noticed her hands on the suitcase. He had seen her fear and named it without making her feel ashamed of it, and told her to wait and see. She sat down in the office chair. She was going to need some time to adjust her understanding of this situation. Jesper was 60 years old, built like a fence post that had been left out in the weather for 40 years, and had the kind of directness that came from a man who had decided sometime around his 40th birthday that life was too short for the preamble. He appeared at the kitchen door precisely at 6, knocked twice, and came in without waiting for an answer. "You're Anna," he said. "I am," she said. She had been sitting at the kitchen table reviewing the first of the ledgers, which was every bit as bad as it had appeared from the doorway. "Good," he said. "We needed someone for those books badly. Cole's been doing them himself, and it's been—" He looked at the stack and shook his head. "It's been something." "I can see that," she said. "How long has he been managing them alone?" 2 years, Jesper said. "Since the last person he hired for it left." "Why did they leave?" she asked. Jesper looked at her with the level gaze of a man who is deciding how much to say. "Couldn't handle the quiet," he said finally. "Some people can't." "And the 2 before that?" Jesper raised an eyebrow. "You've been asking around." "I like to know what I'm walking into," she said. "Fair enough," he said. He pulled out a chair and sat down across from her with the ease of someone who was comfortable in this kitchen and had been for a long time. One left because the work was harder than he expected. One left because Hale offered him a better position, and he took it. Jesper's expression shifted slightly on the name Hale, a tightening barely perceptible. Neither of them had anything to say against Cole specifically. They just— He stopped. "Couldn't handle the quiet?" Anna said. "Right," Jesper said. "What about the quiet bothers people?" she asked. Jesper looked at her steadily. "Cole doesn't explain himself," he said. "He does what he does, and he doesn't tell you why. And if you're the kind of person who needs to know why, you'll make up a reason, and the reason you make up is usually wrong and usually unkind." He paused. "The trouble is, once you've made it up, you believe it. And then you're afraid of something that isn't real." Anna thought about the man in the stable, the horse, the low voice. "He was talking to the horse," she said, "when I came in." Jesper's expression softened in a way that changed his whole face briefly before he put it back. "He does that," he said. "Always has. Animals and people are the same to him. You treat them with patience, and they'll come around. You treat them with force, and they won't." He stood up. "Supper's in 20 minutes. Cole doesn't like late meals." He went back to the door. "Jesper," Anna said. He stopped. "Is he what people say he is?" she asked. Jesper didn't answer immediately. He looked at her with the slow, assessing gaze of someone who is deciding not whether to tell the truth, but which truth to tell. "No," he said. "He isn't." He paused. "But he's not easy either. Being around a man that honest is uncomfortable if you're not used to it. Most people aren't used to it." He left. Anna looked at the ledger in front of her. Then she picked up her pen and went back to work. Supper that first evening was the 4 of them: Nathan, Jesper, Anna, and Danny, a young ranch hand of 20 or so, who had the specific energy of a young man who is trying very hard to make a good impression and is not entirely sure how. Nathan sat at the head of the table. He ate with focus and economy, which was how he seemed to do everything. He asked Anna 2 questions over the course of the meal: how she found the ledgers and whether the office had what she needed, and when she answered both with specifics rather than generalities. Something in his expression registered what might have been approval, though it was small enough that she couldn't be certain. Danny tried to make conversation 3 times, and was received each time with brief direct responses that discouraged elaboration without being unkind. Jesper ate and said almost nothing and watched everything. After the meal, Nathan stood and said, "Thank you," to the room, to the food, to no one specifically, and went outside. Danny cleared the plates with youthful efficiency. Jesper leaned toward Anna and said quietly, "He said thank you. He doesn't always." She didn't know what to do with that either. She found the first real surprise on the 3rd day. She had been working through the 2nd ledger which was a record of miscellaneous expenditures, and she had come across a series of recurring entries that didn't fit the pattern of operating costs. Small amounts dispersed irregularly to no named recipient. Just a notation that said, "Community" in Nathan's sparse handwriting. She went to find Jesper. He was repairing a harness in the tack room, and he looked up when she appeared with the ledger open to the relevant page. "These entries," she said. "What are they?" He looked at the page. Something moved in his expression. Not surprise, but something careful. "Food and supplies," he said, "for families in the area who are short." She looked at him. "He does this regularly. Has for years," Jesper said. "Since the Harmon family lost their barn in a fire in '81, and he quietly rebuilt it over 2 weeks without telling anybody. Wouldn't take payment. Wouldn't take thanks. Just..." Jesper made a gesture with his hand that meant done and moved on. "That's how he is." "Why isn't it entered with any detail?" she said. "Why just community?" "Because he doesn't want anyone knowing it's him," Jesper said simply. "If people know it's him, they feel like they owe him something. And then it's not help anymore, it's trade. He doesn't want trade. He just wants people to be fed." He looked at her steadily. "Don't put it in the main accounts. He'll want it separate." She looked at the entries for a long time after Jesper went back to his harness. The man everyone feared was quietly feeding his neighbors out of his own pocket and refusing to let them know his name. She closed the ledger. She thought about what Pete had said on the wagon. "He doesn't let anyone in." She thought about what Jesper had said. "Being around a man that honest is uncomfortable." She was beginning to understand what they meant. He found her on the porch on the 4th evening, which surprised them both. She had gone out for air after supper, the kind of air she needed when something was pressing on her mind. The cold kind. The kind that made thinking feel more possible because it made everything else feel very immediate. She hadn't expected anyone else to be there. She had thought he went to the stables in the evenings. He stopped when he saw her. She would later think about that moment, the brief involuntary pause the two of them unexpected to each other in the same small space, the way he almost turned back and then didn't. "Sorry," he said. "I didn't know you were out here." "It's your porch," she said. He considered that and then sat down on the other end of the bench she was on, leaving a careful distance between them. Not the awkward distance of two people who don't know each other, but the deliberate distance of someone who understood that space was a courtesy. They sat in silence for a few minutes. She was aware in a way she hadn't been in any of their other interactions that she was not afraid of the silence. That was unusual. She was normally afraid of silence with men who held authority over her. She'd learned to fill it to perform ease she didn't feel to talk until the silence was gone. With Nathan Cole sitting on his own porch on the 4th evening of her employment, she simply sat. "The ledgers," he said eventually. "They're a significant project," she said. "I'll have a full accounting of the situation by the end of next week." "Good." A pause. "Why did you let them get this disorganized?" she asked. And then quickly, because it came out more direct than she'd intended, "I'm not criticizing. I'm asking because understanding what happened is part of fixing it properly." He was quiet for a moment. "I know numbers," he said. "I don't know how to organize them the way they need to be organized. I kept up with what I understood and fell behind on the rest." "You should have hired someone sooner," she said. "I tried," he said. "What happened?" He looked out into the dark. "The first one left because the work was harder than he expected. The second one, Hale hired away. The third one..." He stopped. "The third one was afraid of me. He lasted 4 months." She sat with that for a moment. "Were you surprised?" she said carefully. "That he was afraid?" He looked at her sideways. A brief look and then back to the dark. "No," he said. "I know what people say about me. I don't waste energy being surprised by it." "Does it bother you?" she said. A long pause, long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. "Some days," he said. "Not most." She nodded. "How did you end up in Wyoming?" he asked. The question was direct, the way all his questions were, not intrusive, just honest. "I needed to be somewhere that wasn't where I was," she said, which was more honest than she usually was with employers, and she recognized it even as she said it. He nodded, didn't push for more. "Providence," he said. "How did you know?" "The accent," he said. "Slight, but there." She'd had no idea she still had an accent. She'd been trying to lose it for years. "I worked for a man in Providence who used other people's work and called it his own," she said. And then she stopped because that was enough. That was more than enough for a fourth-day conversation with an employer. "That's not uncommon," Nathan said. He said it without particular emotion, just as an acknowledgement. "No," she said. "It isn't." Another silence. "You can do the work," he said. Not a question. "Yes," she said. "I know," he said. "I could tell when you answered my questions at supper. You don't give general answers. That's good?" She looked at him. "Is that how you assess people, by how they answer questions?" "Partly," he said. "And by what they do when they think no one's watching." She thought about the ledgers, the community entries, the horse in the stable. "You observe people," she said. "I pay attention," he said. "There's a difference." "What's the difference?" He thought about it. "Observation is about cataloging," he said slowly. "Paying attention is about understanding. I'm not interested in cataloging." She sat with that. "That's a more considered answer than I expected," she said. "Most people don't ask the question," he said. They sat for another few minutes. Not uncomfortable, not exactly comfortable. Something in between, the specific middle ground of two people who are still figuring out the shape of what they are to each other. Then he stood. "Good night, Miss Whitmore," he said. "Good night, Mr. Cole," she said. He went inside. She sat on the porch for another 20 minutes, listening to the Wyoming dark. She thought about Mrs. Paulson's warning, about the men at the breakfast table, about the 3 employees who had left, about the look on Pete's face when he described the silence that felt like judgment. She thought about a man who fed his neighbors anonymously and talked to wounded horses and said, "I mean what I say," with the simple, flat confidence of someone who had never needed the statement to be more dramatic than that. She thought, "I am going to have to entirely reorganize the idea I arrived with." And then she went inside. The first real crack in her composure came on the 7th day, and it happened because of something she saw rather than something he said. She had gone to the stable to ask Jesper a question about a supplier invoice, whether a particular delivery had come in full or partial, which would affect how she categorized the cost, and Jesper wasn't there. But Nathan was. He was with the bay mare again. The mare's leg was healing well. Anna had noticed her moving with more ease over the past few days, and today he wasn't working on the bandaging. He was just standing beside her, one hand on her neck, not doing anything practical. Just standing there. He was talking. Not in the low murmur she'd heard the first day. More quietly than that, more like thinking out loud than deliberate speech. She caught fragments. "Easier in the spring. I know. You're going to be fine." The horse had her head turned toward him, her large dark eye fixed on his face, with the complete, uncomplicated trust of an animal that has decided. Anna stood in the stable doorway and watched for longer than she should have. There was something in the quality of him at that moment, the absolute absence of performance, the total privacy of it, a man who believed himself unseen and was therefore entirely himself, that hit her somewhere she hadn't expected to be hit. She had spent years around men who performed their best qualities for an audience and saved their worst for the moments they thought no one was watching. She had calibrated her expectations accordingly. Nathan Cole was exactly himself when he thought no one was watching. She took a step backward. She would come back for Jesper later. But she had moved too quickly or made some sound because Nathan looked up. He saw her. She expected some instinct told her to expect a reaction. Embarrassment, maybe. Irritation at being caught in something private. The particular self-consciousness of a hard man who has been seen being soft. He looked at her for a steady moment. Then he said, "Jesper's at the north fence. He'll be back by noon." Thank you, she said. He nodded and looked back at the horse. No self-consciousness, no explanation, no performance of toughness to counterbalance what she'd seen. Just Nathan Cole continuing to be Nathan Cole, entirely unconcerned with what she made of it. She walked back to the house. She sat down at the office desk and looked at the ledger she'd been working on. She realized with some alarm, beginning to trust this man. Not completely. Not yet. But the architecture of her wariness was shifting. The careful structure she'd built over years of being disappointed was developing cracks, letting in small amounts of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safety, maybe. Or the beginning of it. She picked up her pen. She told herself to be careful. She told herself she didn't know him well enough yet, that first impressions could be managed, that the real character of a person revealed itself under pressure, not in stable conversations and porch silences. She told herself all of that. And then she looked at the community entries in the ledger, the careful anonymous record of a man quietly making sure his neighbors had enough, and she thought, what pressure do I need to see him under to trust what I've already seen? She didn't have an answer, but the question stayed with her. It would stay with her for a long time. 10. On the 10th day, Richard Hale came to the ranch. She knew who he was before anyone told her, because the energy in the yard changed when he rode in. Jesper's posture shifted in a way that was barely perceptible, and Danny suddenly found something to do that kept him close to Nathan, without looking like it was deliberate. And Nathan himself came out of the barn with the particular measured stillness of a man who has put something careful between himself and his feelings. Hale was well-dressed, well-mounted, and had the specific kind of confidence that came not from having earned anything, but from having always had enough money that other people stepped aside. Cole, he said from horseback. Hale, Nathan said. Hale's eyes moved to Anna, who was standing near the house door, with a stack of correspondence she'd been about to take inside. His look lasted a moment longer than was polite. New hire, he said. Yes, Nathan said. Good-looking woman for a record keeper, Hale said pleasantly. The pleasantness was the worst part of it, the way it was delivered like a compliment, dressed up in a tone that made objecting seem excessive. Anna said nothing. She had heard this before. She knew how to hold still through it. She saw Nathan's jaw tighten, just slightly. She manages the accounts, Nathan said. Did you ride out here for a reason, Hale, or just to take up afternoon? Hale smiled the smile of a man who has decided not to be offended because not being offended gives him more room to maneuver. I wanted to discuss the water access again. My answer's the same, Nathan said. The offer's gone up, Hale said. My answer's the same, Nathan said again with the particular patience of a man repeating himself for what he intends to be the last time. Cole. Hale's voice shifted, not quite losing the pleasantness, but it thinned. You're being stubborn about something that doesn't need to be complicated. You'd walk away with enough money to... The water access stays with this land, Nathan said. That access supports 6 ranches besides mine. You know that, and I know that. My answer is no, and it's going to stay no. A silence. Hale looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Anna again, with a slow deliberateness that was not accidental. Well, he said, I hope your new record keeper works out better than the last few. He turned his horse and rode out. The yard held its silence for a moment. Then Danny let out a breath. Jesper turned and went back to what he'd been doing. Nathan looked at Anna. Sorry about that, he said. You don't need to apologize for someone else's behavior, she said. He did it deliberately, Nathan said. To bother me. She looked at him. Did it work? He held her gaze for a moment. Yes, he said. She nodded. Good, she said. A man who can't be bothered by that has a different kind of problem. He looked at her for another second. Then he went back into the barn. But Anna stood in the yard for a moment longer, and she was thinking about the word deliberately. About Hale looking at her deliberately. About Nathan knowing it and naming it and being bothered by it. She was thinking about a man who employed 3 people before her and lost them all to various reasons, who kept to himself and fed his neighbors in secret and talked to horses in the dark, who had told her to wait and see what was true before she decided that man had been bothered by Richard Hale's behavior toward her, had been bothered on her behalf. She was going to need more time to adjust her understanding of this situation. Considerably more time, and yet even as Anna told herself that she understood that time was not really the variable. She had spent 3 years giving her previous employer the benefit of time, and what she'd learned was that time did not change the essential nature of a person. It only gave you more evidence of what was already there. The evidence she was accumulating about Nathan Cole was not what she had arrived expecting, and that she was beginning to understand was precisely what frightened her most. Not the man, the evidence. Because the evidence was good. And good evidence about a person you depended on for your livelihood and your safety was a dangerous thing to accumulate because it made you trust. And trust was the thing Anna Whitmore had spent 2 years methodically taking apart and storing somewhere dark where it couldn't cost her anything. She went back inside with her correspondence and sat down at the office desk and told herself to work. She worked. But some part of her mind stayed in the yard, replaying the look on Nathan's face when Hale had looked at her that way, the jaw that tightened, the word deliberately, the admission that yes, it had bothered him. She had worked for a man for 3 years who would have laughed. She put down her pen and looked at the wall for exactly 30 seconds. Then she picked it up again. Chanta. The second week settled into a rhythm that Anna had not expected to find comfortable, and found comfortable anyway. She was at the desk by 7 every morning. Nathan was already gone by then. She could hear him in the yard before she was fully awake, the low exchange of voices between him and Jesper, the specific sounds of a ranch morning beginning. She had her coffee and she worked. He came in around noon for a brief meal that he ate with focus and efficiency, and occasionally broke with a question about something in the accounts. She answered. He nodded and went back out. In the evenings, sometimes they were on the porch. Not every evening, not by arrangement, but enough times and consistently enough that it had stopped being an accident and become something neither of them had named. He didn't talk much on those evenings. She had stopped expecting him to. What she had started to understand was that Nathan Cole's silence was not the weapon she had learned to dread, not loaded, not punishing, not pressing her to fill it with apologies or performances. It was simply the natural state of a man who lived inside his own thinking and didn't feel the need to narrate it. She found that to her considerable surprise, she didn't feel the need to fill it either. She had been a filler of silences her whole professional life, had learned to perform ease and warmth and accessibility in rooms where she felt none of those things, because a woman who seemed difficult was a woman who lost her position. She had been filling silences for so long, she'd forgotten she didn't have to. On the porch with Nathan Cole, she stopped. Jesper noticed. Of course, Jesper noticed. On the 12th day, he appeared beside her at the kitchen work table while she was organizing a stack of invoices and said without preamble, "You're settling in." "I'm working," she said. "That too," he said. "But you're settling." He looked at the invoices without actually looking at the invoices. "You don't startle anymore when he comes in the room." She stopped sorting. "I wasn't startling. You were braced," Jesper said. "Every time he came in the first week you braced, like you were expecting something to be thrown." He said it carefully without judgment. "You've stopped doing that." She thought about denying it. Decided it wasn't worth the energy. "He's not what I expected," she said. "No," Jesper said. "He isn't. Most people take longer to figure that out." He picked up a stack of invoices and handed them to her in the correct order, which told her he knew these records better than he let on. Some never do. "Why do the rumors persist?" she asked. "If he's—" She stopped because she wasn't sure yet how to finish the sentence. "Because he doesn't correct them," Jesper said simply. A man who wanted people to think well of him would go into town and have drinks and tell stories and make himself available to be known. Cole doesn't do any of that, so people fill the space with what they imagine. He paused. Also, he did tell Roy Taggart to get off his land so plainly that Taggart told everyone in town he'd been threatened, which was not what happened, but was what Taggart needed people to believe. What actually happened? Anna asked. Taggart was letting his cattle onto Cole's eastern pasture and taking fence wire off Cole's north boundary to use on his own place, Jesper said. Cole told him to stop twice politely. Third time, he told him he had 1 day to remove his cattle and the wire he'd taken, and if he didn't, Cole would take the matter to the county sheriff and Taggart would pay for the wire plus damages. He shrugged. Taggart left his cattle another 3 days. Cole went to the sheriff. Taggart paid. And then Taggart told everyone Cole had threatened him. Jesper's expression was dry and matter-of-fact. The truth doesn't travel as fast as the injury. Anna thought about that for a long time after Jesper left. A man who dealt in facts rather than impressions, who said what he meant and meant what he said, and did not spend energy managing what people thought of him. Who had, as a consequence, allowed a reputation to build around him that bore almost no resemblance to his actual character, because correcting it would require the kind of social performance that was simply not in his nature. She understood that more than she expected to. She had spent her entire professional life managing impressions, performing the ease and deference that the men around her required carefully, never appearing too capable, or too certain, or too unwilling to be overlooked, because those qualities in a woman were called difficult. She had bent herself into the shape that was required, and she had hated it, and she had done it anyway because the alternative was losing the position. Nathan Cole had done the opposite, had refused to bend, and had paid a different kind of price. She sorted invoices and thought about what it cost in different ways to be entirely yourself in a world that kept requesting something else. The first real crisis came on day 14, and it arrived through Danny. Danny had ridden into Millhaven for supplies and come back with flour salt, 2 spools of wire, and a piece of information that he delivered at supper with the specific nervous energy of someone who knows the news is bad, but doesn't know how bad. "Heard something in town," Danny said, looking at Nathan rather than his plate. "About the water access." Nathan set down his fork, just set it down cleanly, and looked at Danny with complete attention. "Hale's been talking to Judge Mercer," Danny said, "about some kind of legal review of the water rights in this section. Someone said—" He swallowed. "Someone said Hale's been paying people to say the current access agreements are informal, not filed proper." The kitchen went very quiet. Jesper across the table did not move. His face was doing the careful stillness of a man who is controlling his reaction. Anna looked at Nathan. His face had gone to the flat, stripped quality she was beginning to recognize, not anger exactly, but the face he wore when something required him to be entirely still while he thought. "Who told you this?" he said to Danny. "Pete," Danny said. "The supply driver. He heard it from Mercer's clerk." "Pete's reliable," Jesper said, not a question. "Pete's reliable," Nathan confirmed. The table held its silence for another moment. Then Anna said, "Where are the water rights documents?" Everyone looked at her. "The original filing documents," she said, "for the water access. Where are they kept?" Nathan looked at her steadily. "In the strong box, in the office." "Have they been reviewed recently?" "No," he said. "Then that's where we start," she said. "Before anything else, before worrying about Hale or Mercer or what Pete heard, we find out what is actually filed, what the documents actually say, and whether there are any irregularities that someone could use to build an argument around." She looked at Nathan directly. "If the filing is solid, Hale's argument falls apart before it starts. If there's something incomplete, we find it before he does and we fix it." Nathan looked at her for a moment. "Can you do that?" he said. "Assess the documents." "I've been reviewing land and financial documentation for 6 years, she said. "Yes, I can do that." Another moment. "All right," he said. After supper, he got the strongbox. The documents were old. Not dangerously old. The water access agreement had been filed in 1872, when Nathan's father had first developed the ranch, and it was a real and legally recorded document. But it was the kind of old that meant the language was not the current standard. The referencing system was from a different era of county record keeping, and there were 3 places where clarifying addenda should have been filed and hadn't been. Anna sat at the office desk and went through every page twice. Nathan sat across from her and did not speak and did not leave. He simply stayed present, available for questions, not hovering. It was, she realized, exactly the right kind of support. Not intrusive, just there. At 10 o'clock, she set down the last page. "The filing is real, and it's solid," she said. "The core agreement is legitimate, and I don't think anyone can challenge it successfully." Nathan let out a breath. "However," she said, and he looked at her with eyes that sharpened immediately. "There are 3 places where the language is ambiguous enough that a lawyer with the right judge could use it to create delay. Not to win, I don't think the case is winnable for Hale, but to create enough uncertainty to make the process expensive and time-consuming." "How expensive?" he said. "Depends on how long it goes," she said. "But legal processes have a way of stretching. If Hale can keep this in dispute through spring and summer, it affects your ability to plan the operation." She paused. "The ambiguous language needs to be clarified through updated filings, addenda that close the gaps." "How do we do that?" "We draft them," she said. "I can write the language, but we need a lawyer to file them properly with the county. Do you have someone you trust?" He was quiet for a moment. "There's a man in Cheyenne," he said. "Barlow. He's handled things for me before. How quickly can you get him out here?" "A week, maybe less," he said. "If I write tomorrow." "Write tomorrow," she said. He looked at her across the stack of documents. "You didn't have to spend your evening on this," he said. "I know," she said. "I wanted to know what we're dealing with." "We're dealing with," he said, quiet, noting the word. She met his eyes. "It's my name in the records too," she said. "If these accounts go into dispute, it reflects on the work I've done. I have a professional interest." He held her gaze for a moment. "Thank you," he said, and then more quietly, "Anna." It was the first time he had used her given name without the miss attached. She gathered the documents into a neat stack and did not let herself react to that in any visible way. "Good night, Mr. Cole," she said. "Good night," he said. She went to her room and sat on the edge of her bed and looked at her hands for a long moment. He had said her name like it was something specific. Not casual, not careless. Specific. She told herself it was a detail. She didn't entirely believe herself. She wrote to her contact in Cheyenne the same night Nathan wrote to Barlow. She hadn't told him she was doing it. She did it because she had a former colleague, a woman named Clara Hetch, who had married a county records clerk, and who was therefore in possession of an extremely useful kind of information, and it occurred to her that understanding what Hale had actually filed, if anything, was as important as shoring up Nathan's documents. She sent the letter with Danny on his next supply run and told him it was personal correspondence. Danny, to his credit, asked no questions. The reply came back in 4 days. Clara Hetch wrote that her husband had found no formal filings from Hale or anyone connected to him regarding the water access. What he had found was 3 conversations on the county records, 2 of them with Judge Mercer's office, requesting information about the original 1872 agreement, specifically about the names of the other ranches referenced in the access rights. Anna read that sentence twice. He wasn't just going after Nathan's water access. He was mapping the other ranches, all 6 of them. She took the letter straight to Nathan. She found him in the yard mid-conversation with Jesper about something regarding the north pasture, and she said, "I need to speak with you," in the tone that she had without realizing it developed for moments that required his immediate attention. He recognized it clearly because he looked at Jesper and said, "Excuse me," and followed her to the office without asking what it was. She handed him Clara's letter. He read it once, then again. When he looked up, his expression was the flat, stripped-down one, but with something underneath it that was harder. Not anger. Something more like the specific cold that came before anger, when a man had time to think. "He's not trying to buy the access," Nathan said. "He's trying to take all of it." "That's what it looks like," she said. "If he controls the water access for all 6 ranches, every ranch in this section depends on him," she said. "He becomes the only person anyone out here can afford to cooperate with." Nathan set the letter down on the desk. He stood very still. This, Anna had learned, was how he processed serious things, not with motion, not with the pacing and exclaiming that most people did when hit with difficult news, but with a complete and concentrated stillness that used to make her nervous, and now she recognized as him doing something important inside himself. "The other ranchers," he said. "They need to know." "Yes," she said. "Hale knows I'll fight him," Nathan said. "He's been expecting that. But if the other ranchers know what he's actually planning." He stopped. Some of them might have already been approached. He might have offered them individual deals separate from each other with terms that looked good until you understood the full picture. "Divide and settle," Anna said. "Get them one at a time before they can compare notes." "Yes." Nathan looked at her. "You saw this before I did." "I've seen it before," she said. "Different industry, same principle." He held her gaze. "In Providence." "Yes," she said. He nodded slowly. "What do we do?" She had been thinking about this since reading Clara's letter. "You call a meeting," she said. "All 6 ranchers, here or somewhere neutral. You put Clara's letter on the table not as accusation, as information. You show them the pattern. You let them decide what to do with it together rather than separately." He looked at her for a long moment. "You think they'll come?" he said. "Some of them have been listening to Hale." "Some of them have been afraid of you," she said directly. "And if you reach out to them person to person, not through a letter in person, or as close to it as distance allows, they'll know it's serious enough that you're making the effort." He was quiet. "I'm not good at that," he said. "The reaching out, showing up." "I know," she said, and then carefully, "I can help with that part, if you want me to." He looked at her with an expression she was still learning to read, not the flat stillness, something more open than that, something that showed the edge of what was happening in him. "Why?" he said. "Because 6 ranches worth of livelihoods depend on someone doing it," she said. "And because," she stopped, tried again, "because you've done things quietly for a long time for people who didn't know you were doing them. I'd like this to not be quiet. I'd like people to know who's standing up for their water." He was still. "That's not why I do things," he said. "I know," she said. "That's what makes it worth saying." Something moved in his face, deep and brief, like a shift in the ground before you feel the rumble. Then he said, "All right, let's plan it." They worked until midnight. She drafted the letters to the other ranchers, careful, factual, specific, and he sat across from her and corrected anything that didn't match exactly how things stood between him and each neighbor. Because he knew these people by years of proximity, even if not by friendship. And the tone had to be right. It was the most she had ever heard him talk at one stretch. Not comfortably. He was not a comfortable talker, not in the way of people who enjoyed the sound of their own voice. But he talked because it was necessary and because she was asking the right questions, and she learned things in those 3 hours that no amount of ledger review would have taught her. She learned that the Harmon family, the family whose barn he had rebuilt in '81, had repaid him 2 years later with a winter's worth of firewood that had appeared at the ranch one morning without explanation. That they had not spoken of it to each other and probably never would. She learned that the Carver Ranch to the south had a well that was failing, and that Nathan had been sending his well man over on alternating Tuesdays for 3 months. She learned that a woman named Mrs. Delaney, widowed 2 years ago, was managing a small operation 3 miles east entirely alone and had refused every offer of help until Nathan had framed it as a trade a week of his hands' labor in exchange for use of her East Meadow during the summer grazing rotation, and she had accepted that. Trade, not charity. You knew she wouldn't take charity, Anna said. She's too proud, he said. Nothing wrong with pride. You work around it. She looked at him. You went to the trouble of framing it so she could say yes. If you want to help someone, you have to make it possible for them to accept it, he said, as if this were obvious, as if this were simply how people worked. She thought about her former employer, who had structured every piece of assistance he'd ever offered her as something she owed him afterward. Every salary advance, every recommendation letter, every small professional courtesy, all of it turned into currency that he held. She thought about Nathan rebuilding a barn and accepting firewood 2 years later and never mentioning either thing to anyone. You've been doing this a long time, she said. Doing what? He said genuinely. Helping people in ways that don't require them to be grateful to you, she said. He looked at her like the sentence didn't quite parse. I'm not interested in gratitude, he said. I'm interested in people being all right. She set down her pen. She had been writing letters for 2 hours, and her hand ached slightly, and the lamp needed trimming, and it was past midnight, and she looked at this man across the desk. This man that everyone in Millhaven had told her to fear, this man who spent his evenings on his accounts and his mornings before dawn and his anonymous resources on neighbors who didn't know his name, and she felt something shift in her chest that she had no immediate category for. Not attraction, though. She was not unaware of him in that way. Something older than that. Something more fundamental. Recognition. She recognized something in him. Something she had been once before, 6 years of working for a man who took what she gave and left her. Less she had been someone who helped because it was the right thing to do, who worked, because the work mattered, who engaged with people, because people deserved to be engaged with honestly. She had stopped being that person somewhere around her 3rd year in Providence. Looking at Nathan Cole at midnight over a stack of draft letters, she remembered she had been her once. She picked up her pen. We should finish the Harmon letter, she said. Yes, he said. They worked. The twist came 3 days later, and it came not from Hale, or from the county records, or from any of the sources Anna had been monitoring. It came from Mrs. Delaney. She rode in on a Thursday morning, which was unusual enough that Jesper came to find Anna before he found Nathan, which told her that Jesper had already assessed the situation and made a decision about who should be in the room first. Mrs. Delaney was 62, small and upright, with the kind of face that had decided decades ago to be done with softness, and had found a different kind of beauty in the transaction. She came into the kitchen and sat down without being invited, and looked at Anna with sharp, assessing eyes. You're the one managing his accounts, she said. I am, Anna said. You wrote the letter I received yesterday. I drafted it, Anna said. Mr. Cole reviewed and approved it. Mrs. Delaney looked at her for a long moment. Hale came to see me 2 weeks ago, she said, before the letter. He made me an offer for the East Meadow. Said the East Meadow was the key piece of the water access puzzle, and that if I signed over a permanent lease, he'd pay me enough to carry the ranch for 3 years without worrying. Anna was very still. What did you say? I told him I'd think about it, Mrs. Delaney said, because I needed to understand why he wanted it specifically. She reached into her coat and produced a folded piece of paper. This is the lease document he sent after. I want you to read it. Anna took the document. She read it. And then she understood exactly what Hale was doing. The East Meadow lease included, buried in the 3rd page, under a section about maintenance obligations, a clause that transferred to Hale, not just the meadow, but all water access rights historically connected to that parcel, including the shared access that connected to Nathan's property and 4 others. 1 signature from Mrs. Delaney. That was all Hale needed. Not a legal battle, not a dispute with Nathan. 1 elderly widow's signature on a document she might not have read all the way through. Anna set the paper down very carefully. He didn't tell you about the water access clause, she said. He did not, Mrs. Delaney said. I read it myself at 2 in the morning because I couldn't sleep. Her voice was even. I want to know what it means. It means, Anna said, that if you sign this, Richard Hale would control the water access for 6 ranches in this section, including this one, and every rancher out here would be dependent on his terms to water their cattle. The kitchen was very quiet. Mrs. Delaney sat with that for a moment. And Nathan Cole, she said. He's been fighting Hale's attempts to acquire that access for 2 years, Anna said. He refused to sell, so Hale found another way. Mrs. Delaney looked at her steadily. Nathan Cole rebuilt my barn, she said. Flat, simple statement. I know, Anna said. Something moved in Mrs. Delaney's face, not surprise she had known, but something that was being confirmed. He never said a word to me about it, Mrs. Delaney said. No, Anna said. He wouldn't. Mrs. Delaney looked at the document on the table. I won't sign this, she said. But I want to come to the meeting. I want to sit at the table. You should be at the table, Anna said. Mrs. Delaney stood. I'll be there Saturday. She looked at Anna one more time, with those sharp, assessing eyes. You're good for him, she said. I work for him, Anna said. Mrs. Delaney gave her a look that said very clearly that she found this response both technically accurate and fundamentally insufficient. Then she left. Anna sat at the kitchen table and looked at Hale's document for a long time. One signature. That had been the plan. That was how close it had come. She heard Nathan's boots on the porch, and she stood and went to the door, because this was not something she was going to deliver sitting down. He came in and saw her face and stopped. What happened? He said. She handed him the document without preamble. She watched him read. Watched the stillness come over him, the deep, concentrated kind, and then underneath it something she had not seen on his face before. Something old and tired and very, very clear. He had been fighting this for 2 years. He had been carrying this alone for 2 years. Mrs. Delaney's coming Saturday, Anna said quietly. She's with you. He set the document down. He stood at the kitchen table with both hands flat on it and did not speak for a full 30 seconds. Then he said, He almost had it. Yes, she said. Without a fight, he said. Without me ever knowing. Yes. He looked at her. You asked the right questions. You wrote to the right person. He stopped. You would have found it, she said. Not in time, he said. She held his gaze. Then it's a good thing I'm here. He looked at her with that expression, the open one, the one that showed the edge of what was behind the stillness. And he said with a quiet and complete conviction that she felt land somewhere very specific in her chest. Yes, he said. It is. She looked away first. She went back to the desk and picked up her pen and told herself to work, but her hands were not entirely steady, and this time she couldn't tell herself it was just the cold, because she knew exactly what it was, and knowing it was the thing that kept her at the desk until 11 that night, working through documents she had already read twice, because work was the only reliable way she had ever found to outrun something she wasn't ready to face. Nathan did not come back to the office that evening. She heard him in the kitchen briefly, the sound of the stove a cup, the particular economy of a man who moves through his own house without ceremony, and then the front door, and then the yard, and then nothing. He had gone to the stable. She knew that without looking. It was where he went when something was pressing on him hard enough that he needed the specific quiet that only animals provided. She understood that impulse completely. She also understood sitting at the desk at 11 o'clock with Hale's document on one side and her draft letters on the other, that she had crossed some line in the past few hours that she had been very carefully not crossing for 3 weeks. She had stopped thinking of this as a professional situation. She had started thinking of it as hers. Not his, not the ranch's, hers. We are dealing with this. That was what she had said, and she had meant it not as professional courtesy, not as the appropriate language of an employee invested in an employer's success. She had meant it the way you meant something that belonged to you. That was a problem. She put the papers in order, turned down the lamp, and went to bed. She did not sleep well. Saturday came with a cold that had teeth in it. 6 ranchers. That was how many Nathan had reached, and all 6 had agreed to come, which told Anna more than anything else that whatever people in Millhaven said about Nathan Cole, the people who actually shared his land and his water and his territory had a different assessment. She had the kitchen table extended with 2 extra boards Danny had found in the barn, and she had organized the relevant documents into individual packets, one for each rancher. Clearly labeled the key passages marked, because she had learned that people absorb difficult information better when they could hold it in their hands. Nathan came in from the yard 20 minutes before anyone was expected and stopped in the kitchen doorway and looked at the table. He looked at it for a moment. "The packets," he said. "One for each person," she said. The core documents, the relevant passages marked Clara's letter summarized on a separate page, so it's readable without legal background. She paused. People make better decisions when they can see what they're deciding about. He looked at her with that specific look, the one she had been telling herself not to catalog. "Yes," he said. "They do." He came to the table and picked up one of the packets and opened it. He went through it with the focused efficiency he brought to everything, and when he closed it, he said, "You did this last night." "And this morning," she said. "You didn't sleep much," he said. She looked up. "How do you know that?" "Light under your door at 2 in the morning," he said, flat, factual, not intrusive, just honest. She did not know what to do with the fact that he had noticed. "There was a lot to prepare," she said. He set the packet down and looked at her directly. "Anna," he said. "Thank you." Not the formal thank you of an employer to an employee. The other kind. The kind with weight in it. She picked up her coffee cup. "The ranchers will be here soon," she said. "Let's talk through the order of what you want to present." He let her redirect. That was one of the things about him he knew when someone needed a door, and he didn't block it. They talked through the meeting structure for the next 15 minutes, standing at the table, and by the time the first wagon pulled into the yard, they had a plan, and she had her composure back, and she told herself the composure was going to hold. The Harmon family arrived first. Tom Harmon was 50 solid with a handshake like a door closing, and he brought his wife Martha, which Anna had not expected, and which told her immediately that the Harmons made decisions together. Mrs. Harmon shook Anna's hand and looked at the organized table and said, "Good. Someone with a system. We've needed someone with a system." The Carver brothers arrived together, 2 men in their 40s who were so similar in manner that Anna couldn't immediately tell them apart, until she noticed that the taller one deferred to the shorter one on anything that required a decision, which clarified the dynamic quickly. The remaining 3 ranchers arrived within 10 minutes of each other. Frank Odell, who was younger than the rest, and nervous in a way that suggested Hale had already been at him. Bill and Sarah Croft, a married couple, who sat close together and listened hard. And Mrs. Delaney, who arrived last on her own, and sat down at the table, and folded her hands, and looked at Nathan with a directness that was something adjacent to gratitude, and something adjacent to challenge, as if she was still deciding how much of each was appropriate. Nathan stood at the head of the table. He didn't perform ease. He didn't open with pleasantries or apologies for the trouble of bringing them out. He simply said, "I called you here because Richard Hale is trying to take the water access for all of us, and I think you should know what that looks like before he finishes arranging it." Silence. Then Frank Odell said, "He came to see me 3 weeks ago. Offered good money for a right-of-way across my south boundary." "I know," Nathan said. "He's been to most of you, probably with different offers, different parcels. Take a look at the packet in front of you, specifically the summary on the top page." The sound of paper. The sound of people reading. Tom Harmon reached the relevant passage first. She could tell because his jaw tightened. He looked up at Nathan. "He's mapping the whole access." "Yes," Nathan said. "One agreement at a time. Martha Harmon said, reading further. So no one ranch sees the full picture. That's right, Anna said. All eyes came to her. She had not planned to speak first, but the observation was too important to let pass. Each offer looks reasonable on its own. Each piece of land seems like a fair transaction. It's only when you put them together that you see what he's building. Who are you? Frank Odell said. Not rudely, just the directness of a man who had been in a room for 10 minutes and wanted to know who was talking to him. Anna Whitmore, she said. I manage the Black Creek accounts. I've been reviewing the relevant legal documents for the past week. She found the lease clause, Nathan said. He looked at Mrs. Delaney. Mrs. Delaney put her copy of the Hale document on the table without ceremony. He sent me this, she said. Page 3, third section down. The documents went around the table. The room got very quiet while people read. Anna watched them, the way understanding moved through the group like weather, the moment each person reached the clause and absorbed what it meant. Odell went pale. The shorter Carver brother said a word under his breath that his brother ignored. Bill Croft looked at his wife, and the look they exchanged contained an entire conversation. Mrs. Harmon said, he was going to do it through Clara. She used Mrs. Delaney's given name with the ease of long acquaintance. Because she's alone, and the offer looked good, and he thought she wouldn't read the whole document. That was the plan, Anna said. That's a contemptible plan, Mrs. Harmon said, with the flat precision of a woman who had decided something. Yes, Anna said, it is. Nathan looked around the table. I've had an attorney in Cheyenne reviewing the core water rights documents. The original filing is solid, it can't be broken directly. But Hale found a piece of land that's technically separate from the main filing, and he's been working around it. He paused. We need to close that gap. And we need to do it together because the gap affects all of us. What does closing it require? Tom Harmon said. A joint filing, Anna said. All 6 ranches on record as parties to the shared access agreement. Right now it's implicit the agreement references shared access, but each property's connection to it is assumed not documented. If we make it explicit and current, there's no separate piece Hale can get to. That requires all of us to sign, Bill Croft said. Yes, Anna said. What if one of us doesn't? Frank Odell said. The room went quiet in a specific way. Anna looked at Odell. Are you considering Hale's offer? She asked directly. Odell looked uncomfortable. He made it sound, what did he offer you? Tom Harmon said. Enough to cover a bad year, Odell said quietly. I've had 2 bad years. The table absorbed that. Nathan said, Frank, just the name, nothing else. Odell looked at him. I know about the last 2 years, Nathan said. I know the Odell operation has been short. He paused. I should have come to you directly. I didn't. He held Odell's gaze. Whatever Hale offered you if the operation needs help, there are ways to do that without putting everyone's water at risk. Odell stared at him. You're offering to help me, he said. Flat. Not quite believing it. I'm saying the offer exists, Nathan said. What you decide is your business, but I wanted you to have it before you decided. The room was very still. Anna watched Odell's face work through something complicated, the specific struggle of a man who has been carrying something alone and has just been handed an unexpected door. I'm not signing Hale's document, Odell said finally. I just needed to hear that someone... He stopped. Tried again. That it wasn't just my problem. It's not just your problem, Nathan said. Mrs. Delaney, who had been sitting silently through this exchange, said, Nothing out here is just one person's problem. That's what Hale has never understood. He thinks he's dealing with individual sellers. He's actually dealing with a community. She looked around the table. Are we going to behave like one? The question sat there. Tom Harmon said yes. His wife said yes. The Carver brothers in unison said yes. Bill and Sarah Croft looked at each other, and Bill said, yes. Odell said, yes. More quietly, but without hesitation. Mrs. Delaney looked at Nathan. Yes, she said. Obviously. Nathan looked at Anna. She was not a rancher. She was not a party to the agreement. She was the hired help. He was not supposed to look at her at this moment as if her answer was part of the table. He looked at her anyway. Yes, she said. Thud. After the ranchers left, Anna cleaned up the table and organized the documents, and Nathan stood in the kitchen and said nothing for several minutes, which was different from his usual silence. This one had something in it she couldn't immediately name. You said yes, he said. I know, she said. You're not a property owner, he said. No, she agreed. But you said yes, he said again. She set down the stack of papers she was holding and looked at him directly. You looked at me, she said. So I answered. He held her gaze for a long moment. I shouldn't have done that, he said. Probably not, she said. It wasn't. He stopped. I didn't mean to put you in an uncomfortable position. You didn't, she said. I meant what I said. He looked at her with the open expression, the one that was becoming harder for her to look at steadily, because it showed too much of what was underneath the stillness, and what was underneath the stillness was something she was not ready to name. I know you did, he said quietly. She picked the papers back up. Barlow's coming Thursday, she said. Yes, he said. Then we have 3 days to finalize the joint filing language, she said. I'll have a draft by tomorrow evening. He nodded. She went to the office. She sat down at the desk and looked at the blank piece of paper in front of her, and told herself firmly, specifically, without any ambiguity, that she was an employee. That this was professional. That what had just happened in the kitchen was two people who were in the middle of a complicated situation, having a moment of honesty about it, and that honesty between people in close quarters during a stressful period was not the same as anything else. She told herself that. Then she started writing. The storm hit Tuesday night without much warning. Wyoming winter storms had a way of doing that, of gathering at the edge of the territory and moving faster than anyone calculated, so that what had been clear sky at supper was a serious situation by midnight. Anna woke to the sound of wind that had intent behind it and knew immediately that it was not the ordinary kind. She heard Nathan already up, heard Jesper's voice in the yard, and Danny's, and the particular urgency of men who are moving fast because animals are in danger. She dressed quickly and went to the kitchen and put the coffee on, which was the most practical thing she could do in the immediate term, and then she went to the window and assessed what was visible. It was bad. When Nathan came back inside 20 minutes later, his coat was white, and his face was tight in a way that told her the situation out there was worse than the sound of it in here. 3 fence sections down on the east side, he said. Cattle are moving wrong. They'll push toward the Delaney boundary if the east fence doesn't hold. What do you need? She said. I need it to stop snowing, he said. Dark flat. Not humor, just the unfiltered truth of a man under pressure. What can I actually do? She said. He looked at her. The Harmon Ranch is closest to the east boundary. If the cattle push through to Delaney's, she'll have stock on her pasture before morning and no way to move them alone. Someone should ride to Harmon's and warn them. I'll go, she said. He stared at her. The road. I know the road to Harmon's, she said. I've ridden it twice with Jesper. I can do it. It's a storm, he said. I'm aware of that, she said. I'm also aware that you're needed here. Jesper is needed here. Danny is not experienced enough for this kind of message, and Mrs. Harmon specifically will mobilize her household faster than Tom will. She looked at him steadily. Let me go. He looked at her for 3 seconds. Exactly 3. Take the black horse, he said. He knows that road better than you do. Let him pick the pace. He went to the shelf and pulled down a lamp with a covered glass. Stay on the road. Don't try to cut across. I know, she said. If it gets worse before you get there. I'll stop at the Harmon barn and wait, she said. I'm not reckless. He looked at her for one more moment. No, he said. You're not. He handed her the lamp. His hand covered hers for a moment on the handle, just a moment, just contact, the most ordinary and extraordinary thing. Be careful." She went. The ride to Harmon's took 40 minutes in conditions that made 40 minutes feel like a long time. The black horse was, as Nathan had promised, sensible about the road he moved, with the careful, confident pace of an animal that trusted its own footing more than any encouragement from its rider. And Anna gave him that trust and focused on staying on and staying oriented and not letting the wind make her doubt the direction. She was not afraid. That surprised her enough that she noted it, not the absence of discomfort. She was cold, and the wind was loud, and the visibility was genuinely poor. But the absence of the specific fear she would have expected. She was focused. She was purposeful. She knew what she was going there to do, and that knowledge was something solid to hold. Martha Harmon answered the door before Anna finished knocking, which meant she'd been awake and watching the storm. Anna told her in 3 sentences, "East fence down, cattle moving." If they pushed through to Delaney's, the widow would have stock in her pasture by morning and no hands to deal with it. Martha Harmon said, "Tom," at a volume that suggested Tom was already up, and he appeared in the doorway behind her in 20 seconds with his boots on and his coat in his hands. "Cole's east fence," he said. "Yes," Anna said. "He'll have hands on it already," Tom said. "But if they push east," he was already buttoning. "I'll ride to Peters and get his boys. We can have 4 riders on Delaney's east boundary before the cattle get there if we move now." "I'll send word to Odell," Martha said. She looked at Anna. "Come inside. You're not riding back in this." "I need to." "You need to be warm for 10 minutes," Martha said, with the specific authority of a woman who is done discussing this. "Then you can ride back. Come in." Anna came in. Martha poured coffee with efficient practicality and put a blanket around Anna's shoulders and said, "Nathan sent you." "He needed to stay at the ranch," Anna said. Martha looked at her with a look that was knowing and warm and slightly amused all at once. "He trusted you with his horse," she said. "Nathan Cole doesn't trust people with his horse." "He trusted me with the message," Anna said. "The horse was practical." Martha said nothing to that, but her expression said several things. Anna drank the coffee and was warm for 10 minutes and then rode back. The storm wound down by dawn. When Anna came back into the ranch yard, Nathan was at the fence line. She could see the figures of him and Jesper and Danny in the early gray light working the repair. She took the horse to the stable and unsaddled him herself and made sure he was properly settled, because that was what you did with a horse that had done its job well. Then she went to the kitchen and made breakfast because they were going to need it. Nathan came in an hour later, cold to the bone, and moving with the specific fatigue of a man who had been working since midnight in terrible conditions. He stopped in the kitchen doorway and looked at the food on the table and looked at her. "The Harmons mobilized," she said. "Tom said he'd get Peter's boys to cover Delaney's east boundary. The message got through." He sat down. He looked at the table for a moment and then at her. "You're all right," he said. It came out as something between a statement and a question. "I'm fine," she said. "It was a manageable ride. Your horse is excellent." He said, "Anna." She stopped moving. "Thank you," he said. And then more quietly, and with something in it that was not the professional thank you and not the weighted one from the meeting day, and was something she had not heard from him before, "For going. I should have thanked you before you left." "I didn't." She looked at him across the kitchen. "You had a fence down and cattle moving," she said. "I know," he said. "I still should have." She sat down across from him. There was a silence. The particular kind, theirs, the one that had developed over 3 weeks into something specific and recognizable. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes," he said. "Why do you live so alone?" she asked. Not as criticism, genuine. He looked at his coffee cup. "People leave," he said. He said it the same way he said everything, simply without drama, like the statement of a fact that he had made peace with. Or they decide they can't stand something about this place, or something I did or didn't do. I got tired of... He stopped. I got tired of building on foundations that turned out to be temporary. She thought about that. "So, you stopped building," she said. He looked up. "I built what I could build alone." "A ranch," she said. "Yes, but not—" She started and then stopped. "Not anything that required someone else to stay," he said, finishing the thought she hadn't finished. "No, not that." She looked at him. "Do you think that was the right decision?" she said. He was very still for a moment. "I thought it was," he said. She held his gaze. "And now—" The kitchen was quiet. Outside, the storm was genuinely done. She could hear the change in the air, the wind settling the silence that came after. Nathan looked at her with that open expression. "And now," he said slowly, "I'm not sure." The words landed in the kitchen and did not move. Anna looked away first. She looked at the table and picked up her coffee cup and took a drink and set it down carefully. "The filing draft," she said. "I should have it ready for you this afternoon." "Anna," he said. She looked up. "I need to tell you something," he said. His voice was different, stripped of the usual management, entirely plain. "I'm not good at this. At saying things that aren't about work or land or practical matters. I never have been. But I want to say it clearly so there's no confusion." She was very still. "You rode out in a storm last night because it needed doing," he said. "You've been in that office every day since you arrived because it needs doing. You organized a meeting that I didn't know how to organize. You found Hale's clause before I knew to look for it." He paused. "But none of that is—" He stopped. Found the word. "None of that is why I'm saying this." She did not look away. "I don't want you to leave," he said. "Not because of the accounts, not because of the filing or the water rights or any of it. I want you to stay because the past 3 weeks are the first time in a long time that this place has felt—" He stopped again. "Like it's supposed to feel. Like something I want to come back to." The kitchen held the sentence. Anna's hands were flat on the table. She said, "I've been afraid of this." He looked at her. "Of what I just said. Of feeling like I wanted to stay somewhere," she said. "I was afraid." She stopped. "I spent 3 years becoming smaller and smaller inside a situation I was afraid to leave. And when I finally left, I told myself the solution was to never want something I couldn't walk away from." He said nothing. "Then I came here," she said. The silence stretched. "I'm not asking you to stop being able to walk away," he said. That's not what I'm saying." She looked at him. "I know," she said quietly. "That's why it's harder." He held her gaze. "Nathan," she said. His given name the first time she had used it without thinking about using it. "Yes," he said. "I was afraid of you when I arrived," she said. "Everyone told me to be." "I know," he said. "But I was wrong," she said. "I was afraid of the story. I had no idea about the man." She looked at him steadily. "I'm not afraid of you. I want to be clear about that." "Then what are you afraid of?" he said. She held his gaze for a long moment. "Of how much I'm not afraid of you," she said quietly. "Of what that means." The kitchen was very still. Nathan looked at her with the completely open expression. No management, no stillness, nothing held back. He said, "That might be the most honest thing anyone has ever said to me." She looked down at the table. "Don't make something of it," she said. "I'm not," he said. "I'm just—" He paused. "I'm glad you said it." She picked up her coffee cup. She was not going to cry. She was a practical woman, and she was not going to cry at a kitchen table at 7 in the morning after a night storm. She didn't cry. But her hands were not entirely steady. And Nathan across the table said nothing more, because he understood completely, and without being told that she had said everything she was ready to say, and that what she needed now was not more words, but the same thing he had given her from the beginning: space and presence, both at the same time. She drank her coffee. He ate his breakfast. Outside, the storm was over. And inside, very quietly, something that had been building since a woman gripped her suitcase too hard on a first arrival, and a man took off his hat and said, "You must be Anna." Something that had been building through 3 weeks of porch silences and midnight documents and a storm ride and a kitchen table conversation, settled into a shape that was not yet named, but was unmistakably real. That was the word that stayed with Anna through the following days, the word she kept coming back to, the way you keep coming back to a stone in your shoe that you haven't yet decided to stop and remove, because removing it requires stopping. And stopping requires admitting that the stone is there and that it matters, and that you cannot simply walk through the discomfort indefinitely. The stone was there. She knew it. She went to work. She had the joint filing draft ready by that afternoon as promised, and when Nathan came in to review it, she walked him through every paragraph with the professional precision she had trained herself to maintain, and he listened and asked 3 specific questions and suggested one change that was actually an improvement. And the whole exchange was exactly what it should have been. 2 people working on a document together and absolutely nothing else, and she was grateful for that and slightly miserable about it at the same time, which was the most confusing emotional combination she had experienced in recent memory. Barlow arrived Thursday as expected. He was a compact, efficient man in his 50s who wore his competence the way some men wore expensive coats, not ostentatiously, but so naturally that you noticed the quality immediately and kept noticing it. He shook Anna's hand when Nathan introduced her and said, "You drafted the filing language." And when she said yes, he said, "Good, it's the right approach. Let me see it." And sat down at the table and read it with the focused attention of a man who had been reading legal documents for 30 years and knew exactly what he was looking at. He made 4 changes. 3 of them were technical refinements. The 4th was a structural addition that Anna, reading it, immediately understood was better than what she'd written, and she said so. Barlow looked at her over his reading glasses. "You trained in Boston?" "Providence," she said. "Commercial records." "6 years," she said. He looked at Nathan. "She's better than the last 3 lawyers you used on this." "I know," Nathan said. Anna kept her expression professional. Inside, something warm and slightly dangerous moved through her chest and settled. She told it to settle down. It didn't entirely listen. The joint filing was ready to go to the county by Friday. Barlow would carry it himself to Cheyenne, which was faster and more reliable than the mail, and ensured that the document arrived in the right hands with the appropriate follow-up. Before he left, Barlow sat down with Nathan in the main room, and Anna continued working in the office with the door partially open, which was a habit she had developed because the office was warmer when the kitchen stove was going, and not because she was listening. She was listening. "Hale's going to know," Barlow said. "Once this filing goes through, he's going to know exactly what you did and why. He's going to know it was coordinated." "Yes," Nathan said. "He won't like it," Barlow said. "He doesn't have to like it," Nathan said. "He'll push back," Barlow said. "I don't know how yet, but men like Hale don't accept this kind of setback quietly. He's spent 2 years building toward this." A pause. "I know," Nathan said. "Do you have someone watching the county filings?" Barlow said. Silence. Anna set down her pen and called through the half-open door. "I have a contact in the county records office. She'll notify me if anything is filed that involves any of the 6 properties." Another pause. Longer. Then Barlow said in the tone of a man who is recalibrating, "Good. That's good." Anna picked her pen back up. She heard very quietly what might have been Nathan making a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was adjacent to one. She kept writing. Barlow left Friday morning. Saturday arrived, and Nathan was quieter than his usual quiet, which was saying something, and Anna let him have it, the way he had always let her have what she needed, which was the most natural and comfortable reversal she had ever experienced in a professional relationship, that she was still telling herself was primarily professional. She was telling herself this less convincingly as the days passed. On Saturday afternoon, she went to the stable for no particular reason, or rather for the particular reason that she needed to move and think simultaneously, and the stable was where she had noticed that useful things happened when you needed to think. The bay mare's leg was fully healed. She moved around the stall with the easy, recovered confidence of an animal that has come through something difficult and is simply glad to be through it. Anna stood at the stall gate and watched her, and thought about things she was not quite ready to think about directly. She heard Nathan come in behind her. She didn't turn around. He came and stood beside her at the gate, looking at the mare. "She's been weight-bearing on it for a week," he said. "Another week and she can go back to the pasture." "She looks good," Anna said. They stood in the comfortable quiet that was theirs. Then Nathan said, "I owe you an apology." She looked at him. "Thursday morning," he said. "The kitchen. I said things He stopped. "I put something on you that you didn't ask for, and then I let you manage it alone. That wasn't right." She turned to face him more fully. "You said something honest. I didn't handle it as well as I might have." "You said something honest back," he said. "And I didn't." He made a small, frustrated gesture with his hand that she had never seen from him before, a crack in the usual composure that told her how much he'd been turning this over. "I didn't know what to do with it either, so I was quiet, and quiet wasn't the right thing." She looked at him. "What would have been the right thing?" she said. He held her gaze. "To tell you that what you said about being afraid of how much you're not afraid of me, I heard it, I understood it, and I'm not going to use it as pressure." She was quiet for a moment. "I know you wouldn't," she said. "But I hadn't said so," he said. "There's a difference between knowing something about a person and the person saying it." She looked at him steadily. "You've been thinking about this for 3 days. "Yes," he said, flat, simple. "Have you also been thinking about what you said?" she asked. "About the place feeling like something you want to come back to?" He looked at her without flinching. "Yes," he said. "I meant it. I still mean it." She turned back to the mare. "I'm not going to pretend," she said carefully, "that the last 3 days haven't changed something. I'd be lying if I said I was going to be able to think about this place or this work the same way I did the first week." "I know," he said. "But I also need you to understand," she said, "that I came here because I needed something that was mine, not someone else's project I was serving. Mine. And whatever else happens, whatever this becomes, I need that to stay true." "It is true," he said. "The work you've done here is yours. What you've built in those books, what you found in Hale's documents, what you drafted for Barlow, that's yours. I haven't taken credit for any of it." "No," she said. "You haven't." She paused. "That's part of why this is complicated." He said, "Anna." She looked at him. "I'm not asking you to give anything up," he said. "Not your independence, not your work, not the part of you that walks into a storm alone because it needs doing. I wouldn't want you to give that up." He held her gaze. It would be like asking the ranch to give up the water, the thing that makes it work." She stared at him. He looked slightly alarmed, as if he hadn't planned to say it quite that way. "I'm not comparing you to water," he said. "You kind of were," she said. "I meant." "I know what you meant," she said. And then, because she couldn't help it, it was actually a good metaphor. Something shifted in his face. Was it? "Don't get used to complimenting yourself," she said, but there was no real bite in it, and they both knew it. He almost smiled. Not quite, but close enough that she could see the shape of where it was trying to go. She looked back at the mare. "Give me time," she said. "Not indefinitely, but some." "Yes," he said, immediate and without negotiation. "And don't change how we work together," she said. "I need that to stay the same." "It will?" he said. She nodded once. He nodded once. And then they stood at the stall gate for another few minutes in the silence that was theirs, and nothing was resolved, and something had shifted anyway. And Anna thought that this was probably what it always felt like, not a moment of clarity, but a moment of agreed-upon continuation, moving forward, without knowing exactly where forward went. She could live with that, for now. The trouble with Hale resumed on a Wednesday, which Anna had begun to think of as Hale's preferred day for difficulties, though she understood this was probably coincidence. Danny came back from a supply run with more than supplies. He came back with a look that was trying to be neutral and was not succeeding, and he went straight to Nathan instead of unloading the wagon first, which told her the news was immediate. She followed. Danny said, "Hale's been to see Judge Mercer again. Not about the water access this time." He swallowed. "About you." He looked at Nathan. "About me," Nathan said. "About your—" Danny stopped. "He's saying your water access documentation has irregularities, and he's saying that the person who drafted the joint filing wasn't qualified to draft legal documents, which makes the filing potentially—" He looked at Anna. "I'm sorry. He's going after the filing itself." The kitchen was very still. Anna felt something cold move through her. Not fear. The specific cold of someone who has been attacked through their work, which was a kind of attack she knew intimately. Nathan looked at her. She could feel him looking at her. She did not look up from the table yet. "He knows the filing is solid," she said. "He can't break it on substance, so he's going after the method." "Can he?" Nathan said. She thought through it quickly. "The challenge would be that I'm not a licensed attorney. If he can argue the filing was a legal document that required attorney preparation—" She stopped. But Barlow reviewed it. Barlow signed off. Barlow is a licensed attorney. The filing went in under his supervision. "So Hale can't touch it," Danny said with the relieved confidence of someone who wants very much to be reassured. "He might still try," Anna said. "Not to win, to delay, to cost money and time and force Nathan to defend the filing before the joint agreement has time to fully settle in the county record." She looked at Nathan now. "I need to write to Barlow today." "Right," he said. She was already moving toward the office. She wrote the letter in 20 minutes, which was fast even for her because the situation was clear in her mind and the language needed to be precise, and she knew exactly what Barlow needed to know. She brought it out for Nathan to read before sealing it because she had stopped pretending that the information in this house was divided into his side and her side. He read it, made one addition, a detail about the specific date of Barlow's review that she hadn't included, and handed it back. "Danny can take it this afternoon," he said. "Good," she said. He looked at her directly. "He's going after you specifically because you found his clause. He knows it was you." "I know," she said. "That puts you—" He stopped. "In the same position you've been in for 2 years," she said. "It's all right. I've dealt with men who go after the work when they can't argue with the substance." "Your employer in Providence," he said. She looked at him. "You said he took credit for your work and then made it difficult for you to find other employment," Nathan said. "When you left." His jaw was tight in the way she recognized. "He went after your reputation because he couldn't argue with your competence." "Yes," she said. "That's exactly what he did." "And Hale is doing the same thing," Nathan said. "Yes," she said. "I'm not going to let that happen," he said. The directness of it stopped her. Not a promise wrapped in reassurance. Just a statement of intention, delivered with the flat certainty he brought to every real thing he said. "You may not be able to prevent it," she said carefully. "Legal challenges have their own momentum. I can't prevent him from filing," Nathan said, "but I can make sure everyone in this county knows exactly what you did and why. I can make sure that when he calls your competence into question, there are 6 ranches who will disagree with him publicly." He paused. "And I can make sure Barlow understands that defending the filing means defending the person who drafted it." She looked at him. "You're going to make noise," she said. "You, Nathan Cole, who doesn't go into town, doesn't socialize, doesn't manage his own reputation." "For you," he said simply. "Yes." The kitchen was very quiet. She said, "You don't have to do that." "I know," he said. "I want to." She held his gaze. "Why?" she said. not challenging, genuinely asking. The way she had asked questions since the beginning directly, because directness was the only mode that got real answers from this man. He looked at her with the completely open expression. Because 6 years ago, someone let a man in Providence do it to you, and nobody said a word, he said. And I'm not going to be another person who stays quiet while someone tries to make you smaller. She felt it land, felt it go somewhere deep and stay there. She looked at the table. Nathan, she said quietly. Yes, he said. I need you to know something, she said. Tell me, he said. She looked up at him. I came here afraid, she said. Of you specifically, because everyone told me to be. And I've spent most of the past 3 weeks managing that fear, and then managing what replaced it when the fear went away, and I've been pretending I had it under control when I haven't. She paused. What replaced it is it's not managed, it's not controlled, and I'm telling you that because I think you deserve to know it, and because I'm tired of being careful about it. He was very still. What replaced it? He said. She held his gaze. Trust, she said. Real trust. Not professional trust, not the kind I give an employer. The kind I haven't given anyone in 6 years. She paused. You. The word sat between them. He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, Anna. Yes, she said. I've been waiting, he said, to say something until I was sure it wouldn't frighten you. Say it, she said. He looked at her steadily. I think you already know what it is. Say it anyway, she said. You told me there's a difference between knowing something about a person and the person saying it. He held her gaze. I love you, he said. The same way he said everything simply without performance, without the careful wrapping that most people put around those words. Just the words. Just the truth of them. I don't know exactly when it started, and I haven't been trying to tell you because I didn't want to make you feel like you had to respond a particular way. But I'm saying it now because you said the real thing, and I'm not going to let the real thing sit there without answering it. She looked at him. Her hands were flat on the table. She said, I'm not going to say it back right now. I know, he said. Immediate. You don't have to. Not because I don't. She stopped. Not because I'm not. She tried again. I'm still learning how to want things. I'm allowed to keep, she said finally. I need a little more time to be sure I'm saying it because it's true, and not because I'm afraid of the alternative. He nodded. That's fair, he said. That's more than fair. You're not. She searched his face. You're not hurt by that? No, he said. I asked for honesty. You gave it. That's not something to be hurt by. She looked at him for a long moment. You are, she said quietly, genuinely unlike any person I have ever met. Probably for the worse from what people say, he said. For the better, she said, definitively. He held her gaze, and then Danny appeared in the kitchen doorway with a question about the wagon, and the moment which had been something entire and complete folded itself away into the ordinary afternoon, and Anna went back to the office, and Nathan went back outside, and everything continued exactly as it had been, and was also entirely different. The letter from Barlow came 8 days later. Anna read it at the kitchen table with Nathan across from her, and did not let her expression change while she read, because she had learned that her first read of a document was for information, and her second read was for response, and conflating the two led to imprecision. She read it twice. Then she set it down and looked at Nathan. Hale filed, she said, formally, challenging the validity of the joint filing on the grounds that it was prepared by an unlicensed individual. Nathan's jaw tightened. Barlow says the challenge is weak, she continued. His review and signature are on record, and legally that establishes proper preparation. But the challenge creates a review period of up to 60 days, during which the filing is in a kind of limbo. She paused. It doesn't invalidate it, but it delays full legal standing, which is what he wanted, Nathan said. Which is what he wanted, she confirmed. He looked at her steadily. What do we do? She had been thinking about this since reading the letter. 2 things, she said. First, Barlow needs to file a formal response within 10 days. I'll draft it, he'll review it, and file under his signature. That closes the procedural challenge as fast as possible. She paused. Second, and this is the more important thing, I need to go to the county records office myself. Nathan looked at her. Hale's argument is that I wasn't qualified to prepare the filing, she said. The answer to that argument is documentation. 6 years of documented work references from previous employers, the specific ledger and analysis work I've done here, all of it on record at the county level as supplementary material to the Barlow filing. It doesn't change the legal standing of the document, but it changes the public record of who I am and what I'm capable of. She met his eyes. And it means that the next time he tries to undermine my work, the answer is already on file. He looked at her for a moment. You're going to Cheyenne, he said. Yes, she said. I'll take you, he said, immediately. No deliberation. You don't have to. I know, he said. I'm coming anyway. She looked at him. This is my fight, she said. You've already offered to defend my reputation publicly. You don't also need to. Anna, he said. She stopped. Let me come, he said. Not to fight for you, to be there while you fight for yourself. He held her gaze. There's a difference. She thought about that. She thought about 6 years of doing everything alone because doing it alone was the only way she could be sure it was really hers. She thought about what it meant to accept company without surrendering territory. Yes, she said. All right. We leave Monday, he said. Monday, she agreed. Sunday evening, the night before they were leaving for Cheyenne, Anna was on the porch. She hadn't planned to be. She had been intending to make an early night of it. They were leaving at first light, and it was a long ride, and she wanted to be sharp when they arrived. But something had pulled her outside, instead some need for the cold air and the quiet that she had developed, she realized here specifically. She had not needed outdoor quiet in Providence. She had needed indoor quiet there, the specific quiet of a room with a locked door. Here she wanted the outside version, the wide kind. She heard the door. Nathan came out and sat on the other end of the bench, and they were in their place, their porch, their specific distance, their established silence. After a while, he said, "Are you ready for tomorrow?" "Yes," she said. Nervous. She thought about it honestly. A little. Not about the records office. About... She paused. About saying out loud and in a formal setting that I am who I say I am, and my work is what I say it is. I've done that twice in my life, and both times the person I was saying it to didn't believe me. Barlow believed you, he said. Barlow works with evidence, she said. Yes. So does the records clerk, he said. You're bringing evidence. She looked at him sideways. You're trying to make this rational. It helps me, he said. I thought it might help you. It does help, she said. A little. They sat in the quiet. Nathan, she said. Yes, he said. What you said, she said. In the kitchen. He was still. I wanted you to know, she said carefully, that I haven't stopped thinking about it. And that the time I asked for, it's not because I doubt it. It's because I want to be sure that when I say it, I'm saying it from a place that's solid. Not from fear or gratitude or the specific vulnerability of someone who has spent 3 weeks being treated well for the first time in years. He turned to look at her. I want it to be real, she said. The way everything you say is real. I want it to be like that. He looked at her for a long moment. Okay, he said. Take the time. You're remarkably patient, she said. I've been waiting for things to be right for a long time, he said. I know how to wait. She looked at him. She thought about Mrs. Paulson's warning, about the men at the breakfast table, about Pete saying the kind of quiet that feels like judgment even when it probably isn't. She thought about all the things people had said about this man, and all the things they had missed, and she thought about how close she had come to arriving here and spending her entire time looking at the story instead of the person. "I'm glad I came here," she said quietly. "So am I," he said, more than I knew how to expect. She looked at her hands. Then she looked at him. And before she made the decision, before she thought it through with the careful precision she brought to everything important, she reached across the bench and put her hand over his. He went very still. She did not move her hand. After a moment, he turned his hand over and held hers. They sat like that on the porch in the Wyoming dark. Two people who had arrived at each other by the most unexpected road, and neither of them spoke, and neither of them needed to. The cold was the same cold it had always been. But Anna Whitmore, who had arrived at this ranch gripping her suitcase like it was the only solid thing in the world, was not holding on to a suitcase anymore. She was holding on to something that didn't move. And for the first time in 6 years, she let herself hold on to something that didn't move, and that single act, that quiet decision made on a dark porch in Wyoming, with her hand in his, and the cold pressing in from all sides, turned out to be the most courageous thing Anna Whitmore had ever done. Not the storm ride, not the confrontation with Hale's document, not the 6 years of surviving a man who made himself larger by making her smaller. This, choosing not to let go. She thought about that on the ride to Cheyenne the next morning, sitting beside Nathan on the wagon bench, with the gray winter light beginning to spread across the territory. And both of them quiet, in the particular way they were quiet not from absence, but from presence. The specific fullness of two people who have said the important things and are now simply occupying the same air. He drove. She thought. Occasionally one of them said something and the other responded, and then the quiet came back comfortable as a worn coat. An hour into the ride, Nathan said, "Tell me what to expect at the records office." She appreciated that. Not what do I need to do or how do I help, but tell me what to expect, which was his way of entering her territory as a listener rather than a problem solver. And she had come to understand that this was one of the rarest things about him. "The clerk is a man named Aldous Vane," she said. "Clara, my contact says he's careful and procedurally minded and not easily impressed by status or money, which is why Hale has been working around him rather than through him." "Good man then," Nathan said. "Good for us," she said. "I'll present the supplementary documentation first before I mention Hale's challenge. I want it on record independently before it's in the context of a dispute. So it stands on its own," he said. "Exactly," she said. "If I lead with the dispute, everything I file looks defensive. If I file the credentials first and the response to the challenge second, the record reads differently." He was quiet for a moment. "You've thought about how the record will read." "Records are what I do," she said. "How they're read and when and by whom, that's the whole job." He glanced at her sideways. "You're good at it." "I know," she said without false modesty. He almost smiled. She saw at the edge of it that particular almost smile, and she felt the warmth of it, the way she was starting to feel most things from him directly, without the buffer she used to keep between herself and anything that could matter. She was not going to think about what that meant right now. She was going to Cheyenne to do a job. She thought about it anyway. Aldous Vane was exactly what Clara had described, a small, precise man in his 60s, who wore his authority quietly and looked at everything Anna put on his desk with the focused attention of someone who had been deceived enough times to take nothing at face value and had developed excellent instincts as a result. He went through her 6 years of documented work without speaking. The records from Providence, the ledger work from Black Creek, the specific analysis that had identified Hale's clause, all of it organized chronologically cross-referenced, presented in the clean logical structure that was Anna's particular gift. Nathan sat in the chair beside the desk and said nothing. He was there, that was all. It was exactly the right amount. Vane turned the last page, set it down, looked at Anna over his glasses. "You drafted the joint water access filing," he said. "Under the supervision and final review of attorney Samuel Barlow," she said. "His signature is on file." "I've seen it," Vane said. "I was wondering why a man of Barlow's standing would put his name on a document prepared by a records manager rather than drafting it himself. Because the document was accurate and complete, and he had no improvements to make to the substance, she said. He made 4 technical refinements. You can ask him. Vane looked at her for a long moment. Richard Hale has filed a challenge, he said. I'm aware, she said. His argument is that the filing was improperly prepared. His argument, Anna said, is that I am not an attorney, and therefore the filing is invalid. But the legal standard for a jointly signed land access agreement does not require attorney preparation. It requires accuracy, completeness, and proper execution, all of which Barlow confirmed in writing before the filing was submitted. She paused. Hale's challenge has no legal merit. It has strategic merit because the review period costs time. That's its only purpose. Vane looked at Nathan. She's right, Nathan said, simply, without elaboration. Vane looked back at Anna. The supplementary documentation you filed today, he said, will be entered into the public record independently of the challenge proceeding. Yes, she said. That was my intent. He picked up his pen. I'll expedite the review, he said. Given the nature of Hale's filing, and given, he tapped the stack of documentation she had brought. Given this, she said thank you. He said, don't thank me. Hale has been using this office as a procedural tool for 2 years. I find I prefer it when people use it for its actual purpose. Nathan made a sound that was the closest thing to a laugh she had ever heard from him in a formal setting. Vane looked at him. A very small smile moved across the clerk's face and disappeared. The review will complete in 15 days, Vane said, not 60. Anna kept her expression professional until they were out of the building. In the street, she stopped walking. 15 days, she said. Instead of 60, Nathan said. He expedited it, she said. He didn't have to do that. He wanted to, Nathan said. You gave him a reason. She stood in the cold Cheyenne street and felt something move through her that was not quite relief and not quite triumph, and was something more fundamental than either the specific feeling of a person who has been told repeatedly that their work is insufficient and who has just watched their work speak for itself in a room where the person listening had no reason to be kind. It had spoken clearly. Nathan was watching her. Are you all right? He said. Yes, she said. Then, it worked. Yes, he said. I wasn't entirely sure it would, she said. He looked at her. I was, he said. She looked at him. You were sure, she said. I've watched you work for a month, he said. Yes, I was sure. She held his gaze. The cold street was busy around them, people moving wagons passing the ordinary noise of a town going about its day, and she and Nathan Cole were standing in the middle of it looking at each other, and she thought, this is what it feels like to be believed in before the evidence is in. Not blind faith, he had the evidence, he knew her work. But the willingness to stand on that evidence before the outcome was decided. She had not had that before. She had not known until this moment how much she had wanted it. Come on, she said. There's a good place on the next block for lunch. Clara told me about it. He fell into step beside her. They had lunch and talked about things that were not Hale or water rights or legal filings. She told him about Clara, about how they had met in Providence, about the kind of friendship that survived distance and years and different lives. He told her about the first winter he had spent at Black Creek alone before Jesper, when he had been 24 and stubborn and completely unprepared for how long Wyoming winters actually lasted. How long, she said. Longer than a person from anywhere else believes is possible, he said. And you stayed, she said. I stayed, he said. I almost didn't. She looked at him. What made you stay? He thought about it. I didn't want to be the kind of person who left when it got hard, he said. I didn't want that to be the thing I found out about myself. She held that. I understand that, she said. I know you do, he said. They rode home in the afternoon light, and she sat beside him on the bench, and the distance between them was less than it had been on the way out, and neither of them mentioned it, and both of them knew. The 15 days passed. Vane was as good as his word. The formal notification came to Black Creek by courier on the 14th day. The challenge was dismissed. The joint filing stood. The supplementary documentation was entered into the permanent public record of the county. Danny whooped when Nathan read it out at supper. Jesper said, "Good," in the tone that meant considerably more than the word. Tom predictably said nothing, but his expression was the warmest Anna had seen it. Nathan set the document on the table. He looked at Anna. She looked at the document and then at him. "It's done," she said. "It's done," he said. The kitchen was warm and the food was good, and Jesper had somehow produced a bottle of something that he said he'd been saving and wasn't going to say for what. And they sat around the table longer than usual that evening, the five of them in the particular comfort of people who have been through something together and have come out the other side intact. At one point Danny said, "What's Hale going to do now?" And Jesper said, "Nothing," with a flat certainty. "How do you know?" Danny said. "Because men like Hale only push when they think they can win," Jesper said. "The joint filing is on record. 6 ranches are documented. The county records show what he tried and that it failed. Going after this again costs him more than it gains him." He looked at his cup. "He'll find somewhere else to put his energy. Men like that always do." Nathan said nothing. He was looking at the table with the expression that Anna had learned was him agreeing with something more fully than he wanted to show. She caught his eye. He looked at her for a moment. She picked up her cup. Under the table, she felt his hand brush hers. Brief, specific, entirely deliberate. She did not look down. She did not look at him. She kept her eyes on the conversation across the table, but she turned her hand over and held on. 3 days after the notification, Anna went looking for Nathan in the early morning and found him where she always found him when something was working in him in the stable with the horses, in the particular quiet that he needed when the inside of his head required some room. She stood in the doorway. He looked up. "I've been thinking," she said. "I know," he said. "You get quiet when you're thinking. Different kind of quiet than usual." She looked at him. "You've cataloged my quiets." "I pay attention," he said. "There's a difference." She smiled. She couldn't help it. She recognized the words she had said that to him weeks ago in a different conversation, and the fact that he had held on to them and given them back to her now was the kind of thing that made her chest do something complicated. She came into the stable and stood at the bay mare's gate. "I want to tell you something," she said. He waited. He was very good at waiting. "When I came here," she said, "I was afraid of you, genuinely. I had decided who you were before I met you, and I had built a whole structure of wariness around that decision." She paused. "And then I met you. And everything I had decided was wrong." He said nothing, just listened. "But here's what I've been thinking about," she said. "I wasn't wrong to be careful. I wasn't wrong to protect myself. I had real reasons for the walls I built, 6 years of real reasons." She looked at him. "What I was wrong about was thinking that those walls were permanent, that they were the final version of me." He was very still. "You didn't ask me to take them down," she said. "You didn't push at them or try to convince me they were unnecessary. You were yourself every day consistently, and the walls became unnecessary on their own." She held his gaze. "I've never had that happen before. I didn't know it could." He said, "Anna, let me finish," she said. He stopped. "I told you I needed time to be sure," she said. "I said I wanted to say the real thing from a solid place, not from fear or gratitude or vulnerability." She looked at him steadily. "I'm sure now. I've been sure for longer than I've been willing to say it. And I'm done being careful about something that I know is true." He was not moving. "I love you," she said. The same way he had said it, simply, without decoration, without anything between the words and their meaning. "I love you, and I am not afraid of saying it, and I am not saying it from a temporary place. I'm saying it because it's real, and because you deserve to hear it without qualification." The stable was completely silent. Nathan Cole. The man. Everyone in Millhaven had called dangerous cold, heartless. The man who lived alone in the mountains and frightened off everyone who came near him, stood with his hand on the gate of the bay mare's stall and looked at Anna Whitmore with an expression that was the most open thing she had ever seen on a human face. He said, "Come here." She went. He put his arms around her, not tentatively, not as a question, but with the specific certainty of a man who has decided something and is committing to it fully. And she put her face against his shoulder and felt the solidity of him and the warmth and the particular quality of someone who has been carrying things alone for a long time and has finally completely decided to share the weight. They stood like that for a long moment. Then he said quietly into her hair, "I wasn't expecting you either." "I know," she said. "I put out that advertisement because I was tired of the silence," he said. "I wasn't expecting." He stopped. "What?" she said. "You?" he said. Specifically, exactly what you are. She pulled back enough to look at his face. What am I? She said. He looked at her with that completely open expression. The one she had come to understand was Nathan Cole, without any management at all. Nathan Cole, as he actually was, and he said, the person who made this place worth coming home to. She held his gaze. Good, she said quietly, because I'm not planning to leave. The news traveled through Silver Hollow County, the way news always traveled by mouth, with elaboration arriving at most locations slightly more dramatic than it had begun. But the core of it was accurate. The water rights were settled. Hale's challenge had been dismissed, and Nathan Cole's new records manager had a permanent entry in the county documents that established her credentials so thoroughly that no one was going to challenge them again. Jesper told Danny who told Pete on a supply run, who told Mrs. Paulson, who told everyone she could find in the following 48 hours. Within a week, the general understanding in Millhaven had shifted, not completely, because understanding in small towns never shifted completely, but enough. Enough that when Pete made his supply run to Black Creek the following Tuesday, he tipped his hat to Anna in the yard and said, "Well done, Miss Whitmore," with the particular respect of a man who has revised his opinion and wants the person to know. She said, "Thank you, Pete," and meant it. Mrs. Delaney came out on a Thursday. She sat at the kitchen table and had coffee and talked about practical things, the spring grazing rotation, the fence repair that needed doing on her eastern boundary, whether Frank Odell was going to be reliable now that the community had shown up for him. Then she looked at Anna and said, "You're staying." It was not a question. "Yes," Anna said. "Good," Mrs. Delaney said. She picked up her cup. This place needed someone who understood what it was worth. "The ranch," Anna said. Mrs. Delaney looked at her with the sharp, clear eyes that didn't waste words. "The man," she said. Anna looked at her coffee. "Clara Delaney," she said, using the first name for the first time, which she had been waiting until it felt right, and it felt right now. "Did you know when you came here with that document, did you know what you were doing?" Mrs. Delaney looked mildly amused. "I knew I was bringing Hale's lease to the person who could do something about it," she said. "But you came to me," Anna said. "Not Nathan. You came to me first." Mrs. Delaney was quiet for a moment. "Nathan Cole is a good man," she said. "The best I know, probably. But he spent so long fighting alone that showing up at his door with a problem would have made it his problem to carry." She paused. You would make it a shared problem." "I could see that." Anna held that. "In 3 weeks," she said slowly, "you could see that. In 3 weeks, Mrs. Delaney said, the whole territory could see it. You two just hadn't caught up yet." The spring came differently than Anna had expected. She had experienced the winter, fully had earned her understanding of it through frozen mornings and long work days, and a storm ride and nights when the cold was a physical presence in the walls, and she had thought spring would feel like relief, like escape from something difficult. It didn't feel like that. It felt like continuation. Like the place she was living, taking a breath and moving into its next season, and she moving with it because she was part of it now in a way that was documented and formal, and also something much larger than anything a legal filing could contain. She was on the porch the morning the first real warmth arrived, not the teasing warmth of a clear winter day, but the settled warmth of a season that had decided to stay, and Nathan came out and stood beside her and looked at the same thing she was looking at. "Spring," she said. "Finally," he said. And then after a pause, "You've been here through the whole winter." "I have," she said. "People who make it through the first winter usually stay," he said. The same flat, factual tone he used for everything real. She looked at him. "Is that a statistic?" "It's an observation," he said. She turned to face him more fully. "Nathan," she said. "Yes," he said. "Ask me," she said. He looked at her. Something moved in his face recognition, and something warmer than that. "Will you stay?" he said. "Not will you marry me?" Though that was also in the question. "Not will you be with me, though, that was there too. Just will you stay?" The question that was for Nathan Cole the most fundamental one of all, the one that had been answered wrong enough times that he had stopped asking it until now. She looked at him steadily. "Yes," she said. "Not because I have to. Not because I have nowhere else to go. Not because you've been kind to me, though you have, or because you defended my work, though you did, or because staying is easier than leaving. She held his gaze. Because I choose this, you, this place, this life, with the full knowledge of what I'm choosing and why. He looked at her with the open expression that she had stopped trying to look away from. That's all I ever wanted, he said quietly. Someone who chooses. She took his hand. He held it. Behind them, the ranch was waking up. She could hear Danny's voice somewhere, and Jesper's answering tone, and the particular sounds of a working morning beginning. The spring air moved through the yard, and the mountains held their white tops against the blue sky, and the creek was running high and clear, and all of it was hers, not because a document said so, though a document did say so, but because she had ridden out in a storm for it, and drafted documents through the night for it, and stood in a records office, and put 6 years of work on a stranger's desk for it, and learned slowly and completely that this was the place she was willing to fight for. A woman who had arrived gripping her suitcase like it was the only solid thing in the world, now stood on a porch in Wyoming, with her hand in Nathan Cole's, and the whole spring spreading out in front of her, and knew without qualification that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The man everyone had told her to fear had turned out to be the first person who had ever treated her work as though it mattered her independence, as though it was a virtue rather than a problem, and her presence as though it was something he had needed without knowing to ask for. She had come to Black Creek Ranch afraid. She was leaving fear behind her for good. And Nathan Cole, the cowboy everyone called dangerous cold, impossible to know, had been none of those things. He had been from the very first moment in the stable exactly, and only what he was: a man who spoke quietly and meant everything he said, who helped people without needing credit, who had saved a space beside him without knowing if anyone would ever be willing to stand in it. Anna was standing in it now, and she was not going anywhere.